نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد, Ibn al-Jawzi says in a famous quote that when a racehorse is nearing the finish line and it is able to see the finish line, it is able to see the end of the track, you'll notice that it starts exerting more effort. It starts running quicker in order to win. And so he says, do not let or do not allow the racehorse to be more clever than you. For verily, the endings of each action are the greatest part of it. Brothers and sisters, let us not allow the racehorse be more intelligent than us. Let us not allow his actions to be better than our actions. For indeed, we are at the end of the track. We see the finish line. The finish line that is the end of Ramadan. For we have approached, we are near the last 10 days of Ramadan. And for many of us, we started this Ramadan with a lot of lofty plans and goals. We said that this Ramadan would be different. I would pray more. I would read more Quran. I would make sure to worship and remember Allah more and more. And maybe we started this Ramadan with that energy. Maybe we had that dedication and that passion. Or maybe we didn't. And maybe, even though we had that dedication, that energy started to go down as the days went by. And so this quote from Ibn al-Jawzi reminds us that there is still hope. And the good news is we still have the last 10 days of Ramadan, which are amongst the most beloved and virtuous days in the whole Muslim year. So let us make sure to take advantage of those last 10 days. Let us make sure to increase that effort, to push us further so that we can win and reach that finish line happy and content with that race. The race that is Ramadan. And so the question, brothers and sisters, is how do we take advantage of these last 10 days? What is our job? What can we do to make sure that we take advantage of the last 10 days of Ramadan? And one of the things that I will share with you today is that maybe we can, as a society, as a community, have a collective theme going into these last 10 days. This theme we can use to encourage ourselves and one another. That this is our plan going into the last 10 days so that we can get the most out of it. This theme, which is the topic of this khutbah, I will share with you by sharing a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. This hadith is found in the 40 hadith compilation of Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah. And this hadith, he mentions that the scholars agree that this hadith, along with 3 others, are considered the foundation of Islam. If you combine those 4 hadith together, you could say that the religion revolves around those 4 hadith. But Imam Nawawi goes further. He says that if someone were to utilize this hadith, and to understand this hadith, and to fully encompass this hadith, then this hadith on its own is sufficient for the whole religion. The whole religion revolves around just understanding this one hadith. So what is this amazing hadith that the Imam al-Nawawi is talking about? What is this saying of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? The hadith is narrated by Tamim ibn Aus al-Dari. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الدين النصيحة قلنا لمن لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم. رواه Muslim. The hadith is narrated by a companion by the name of Tamim ibn Aus al-Dari. May Allah be pleased with him. He says that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, indeed the religion is nasiha. And so when he said this, the companions asked, to whom do we owe this nasiha? And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, to Allah, to His book, to His messenger, to the leaders of the Muslims, and to the common folk of the Muslims. And so the question is for us to truly understand this hadith, for us to encompass this hadith, we first have to understand what is a nasiha. What does that mean? And so in Arabic, if you look at the root word, the original meaning of a nasiha goes to the root word nasaha, which means to purify. For example, I could say, nasahtul asal. I purified the honey. That means I removed whatever toxins or whatever impurities are in the honey. And so I make it pure. So a nasiha is sincerity, it's purity. And so the meaning of the hadith is that the religion is sincerity. And if we just understand this hadith, that's the theme of today and the theme of the last 10 days of Ramadan. And ideally our whole life. Nasiha, sincerity. And so if we are able to attain sincerity in all 5 of these categories mentioned in the hadith, we will surely have understood what this religion revolves around. And so one of the scholars, Mullah Ali Qari, he goes into detail about each of these categories and says, how can we show sincerity to each and every one of these? So he says the first one is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sincerity towards Allah. And before we even talk about sincerity towards Allah, who is the most deserving of sincerity, who is the beginning of where our sincerity should be and the end of where our sincerity should be, we must understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in no need of our sincerity. Our sincerity has no effect on Him. He will not gain and He will not lose anything, whether we choose to be sincere or we choose to not be sincere. Rather, the sincerity is for us. We have everything to gain by being sincere towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything to lose by losing that sincerity. And so being sincere to Allah, Mullah Ali Qari says, means to believe in Allah, to believe in His oneness, to believe in His attributes and names without exaggerating them, without misrepresenting them, to follow the commandments of Allah. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, pray 5 times a day, that is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Showing Him sincerity is to follow those commands. Is to say, sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. And yet the problem is when we hear this, the examples of sincerity towards Allah, this is probably the simplest one to explain. We all know how we can be sincere towards Allah. It's not rocket science, we're all aware of it. The issue is, why are we not able to do it? Why is it that when someone tells me to pray, if I do end up getting up to pray, I will feel like it is such a burden? Why is it that when I'm told to make wudu, I feel so weighed down and it's such a chore that I have to wash myself, after waking up before praying Fajr? Man, if only I didn't have to make wudu, prayer would be so much easier. How many of us has that thought crossed their mind? At some point, we've all probably had that thought. Because we don't think of the action as a way to show sincerity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, he says that he gives an example that helps us understand the sincerity. He says that a relationship has one of 2 ways, either fear or love. And he gives the example of having two servants. He says, love is better because if you have two servants, one who fears you and one who loves you, the servant who fears you will be sincere in front of you. But the moment you are out of their sight, they won't be sincere because you're not there to punish them. You're not there to scare them. But the servant who loves you will be sincere to you when you're in front of them and when you're not watching. They will defend you when you're not there because they love you. They feel that connection. They feel that you are worthy of that sincerity, of that loyalty. The issue with us today, our society today, is that we were raised, and we have raised our children with only fear. We have taught them to only fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And don't get me wrong, a healthy dose of fear is necessary. That is why the Quran has wa'd and wa'id. It has promises of Jannah and promises of hellfire. It has the punishments for the disbelievers, but it has the rewards for the believers. But we as a society have focused so much on the negative. So much on, if you don't pray, you'll be this and this. And if you lie, you'll be punished. And if you do this, then you're a terrible person. And if you don't say this, then you're a bad person. And so we've grown up with this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will only punish us. We're only afraid of Allah. And so when we don't think of it, we're not going to pray. When our parents are in front of us to punish us, we're not going to pray. But if we instead shifted to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to truly understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Hadith Qudsi says to his servant who makes a sin and then repents, and makes a sin and then repents, and continues to do so, at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do as you wish, for I have forgiven you. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who says, I am at what my servant thinks of me. أَنَا عِنْدِ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي. If we think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He will treat us that way. But if we only think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the punisher, then may Allah protect us. And so we need to learn to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by learning His attributes and names, by knowing those who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and getting close to the ones who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if you have someone, your spouse, that you love dearly, how can you claim to love them if you do not also love their family? If you do not also love the people that love them and the people that they love? Likewise, surround yourself and love the people who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is how we can get sincerity towards Allah. The second is sincerity to His book, Al-Quran, the final message to all of humanity. Mullah al-Qari says, we show sincerity to the Quran by reciting the Quran. How many of us recite the Quran on a daily basis? How many of us don't just wait till Ramadan to open the Quran, if even that? How many of us know and are aware that the Quran is our guideline for this life? It's our study guide for this world, for the test, for the hereafter. And yet, the Quran, for all the students out here, the Quran is probably the only study guide that we're not opening. The only study guide that we leave on the shelf to dust, to collect dust. To show sincerity to the Quran is to memorize the Quran if we're able to recite it, but when we recite it, sincerity is to recite it properly. To not just eat the words that we're reciting. No, it is to enunciate every letter, to give every letter its right. Because that's the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To give sincerity to the Quran is to understand what we're reading. And the majority of us, myself first, don't understand what the Quran is saying. Forget Arab or non-Arab. The Quran, the Arabic in the Quran is so eloquent, is so deep, because it was the Arabic of 1400 years ago, not Egyptian Arabic. It's the Arabic of poets that was so fasih, so eloquent, it took volumes to explain the Arabic and grammar of what it's saying. So make sure to open a translation and understand what you're reading. Don't just focus on reading the Quran, but read the translation. And yes, it is important that we read the Arabic because the translation is not the Quran itself. It is a human trying to interpret the meaning or the translation of it. But you need to be able to understand at least a basic general gist of the Quran. Or else how are we using it in our life if we don't understand it? That is sincerity towards the Quran. The third is sincerity to the beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The first way we show sincerity to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is by saying sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The second is by loving the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And I will share with you a hadith regarding Umar ibn Khattab that is narrated by Abdullah ibn Hisham. This hadith says that Umar ibn Khattab said to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Ya Rasulullah, La shay'a ahabba minni. He said, there is nothing more beloved to me than you. Everything else is second, except for myself. And to us, we hear that and we say it makes perfect sense. Actually, who of us can even claim that? That's amazing. How many of us can even say we love the Prophet ﷺ more than our own family members? Forget family members. How many of us can say we love the Prophet ﷺ more than our friends? Forget friends. Most of us will realize that we love our colleagues who we see at work more than the Rasulullah ﷺ, because we have such a disconnect from the Messenger ﷺ. Because we don't know Rasulullah ﷺ, but our co-workers we see every day. And so the issue is that we are not able to love the Prophet ﷺ, even though it is so easy. It is so easy to love the Prophet ﷺ. How do we love the Prophet ﷺ? We love the Prophet ﷺ by knowing his story. Read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Listen to the hundreds of YouTube videos, lectures, podcasts. The seerah is abundant. It's the most extensive biography of any human being. You have so many. You have in Urdu, in English, in Arabic, and I'm sure in all other languages. The seerah is abundant and you can read it anywhere or listen to it. Make sure that you learn the seerah, the story of the Prophet ﷺ. And I guarantee, without a doubt in my mind, that if you learn the story of Rasulullah ﷺ, you will not be able to resist falling in love with him. You won't be able to. Because when you hear his story, when you hear what he went through, the sacrifices, the tribulations, just so that a people in Tulsa, Oklahoma can become Muslim and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can't help but love this man, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so we show sincerity to him by knowing his story. And we show sincerity to him by following his sunnah, by following his actions. And unfortunately, because of that disconnect, because we're so far away from the Prophet ﷺ emotionally, sunnah to us has become the opposite of its meaning. Because when someone tells us, oh, why didn't you pray this? And someone says, oh, it's sunnah, to us that means don't worry about it. You're good, bro. It's just sunnah. We say that. We say it's just sunnah. It's not the fard. So you're good. Because we're so disconnected. Because we're not understanding that the sunnah is what the beloved ﷺ did. And we are supposed to emulate him to the best of our ability. We are supposed to, out of love and admiration and reverence to him, do our best to emulate him. So if you want to know if you are sincere to the Prophet ﷺ, if you want to know if you love the Prophet ﷺ, look at your actions. The next time when you can pray sunnah, but you see your friends leaving, or you see your friends going to play soccer, if you decide to pray sunnah first, and you push yourself, you pressure your desires to pray the sunnah first, then go play, then that means at that moment, you chose Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam over yourself. And the ending of the hadith of Umar ibn Khattab was that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, no, you do not attain full iman until you love me more than yourself. And Umar ibn Khattab, he said to him in that narration, he says, now I love you more than my own self. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-ana ya Umar, meaning, now, O Umar, you have attained that perfect, true, sincere iman. The third one is being sincere to the Prophet ﷺ. The fourth one is being sincere to the leaders of the community, A'immatul Muslimin. And we do that by simply serving them. The scholars of the Muslim community, especially here, we have multiple scholars throughout the communities. We have multiple leaders in this community. Respect their knowledge and understand that even if a scholar gives you an opinion that you don't like, that doesn't match your opinion, that doesn't make them wrong. That doesn't make them bad people. That doesn't mean that you should lash out and criticize and disparage and put them down. Because we had different ai''imah, like Imam Malik rahimahullah, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, great scholars. And yet, even though they disagreed, never once did any of the four scholars, and Imam Ahmed rahimahullah, never once did any of them put the other down. In fact, they praised one another. But they disagreed. They said, he is a great human being. We are dependent on him. Imam Shafi'i says, we are dependent on the fiqh of Abu Hanifa, and yet he disagreed with a lot of his opinions. It is called respect. We need to respect our scholars. We need to respect our leaders and give them that khidmah, give them that service. Ask so simple as asking your elders or the leaders of the community, what can I do today to make your life better? What can I do today to service you? Because these leaders are the ones who are serving us. So our job is to help them. That is how we show sincerity to our leaders. And the fifth and final one is sincerity towards the general population of Muslims. And for that one, we have many hadith. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. We know the hadith about من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم ضيفه فليكرم جاره. A hadith narrated by Imam Muslim rahimahullah narrates in his book, in his Sahih, a hadith that there are 6 rights an individual has upon another individual, and one of these is advice. But when we give advice, we give it with sincerity. We give it in a respectful manner. And for these last 10 days of Ramadan, let us give that sincerity towards one another by encouraging one another to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know in a narration that the Prophet ﷺ in the last 10 nights would wake up, but he would wake up his family. Don't ignore your family and loved ones. Don't just say, I don't care about them. They're not listening. I'm just going to focus on myself. Include everyone around you. Include everyone in your worship so that you have done your part towards them. You have shown them sincerity in your actions. And if we are able to do that in all 5 of these categories, then inshallah we would have been able to attain this hadith. And we would be able to attain this theme of الدين النصيحة. Religion is sincerity. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Before I end, inshallah, I just want to remind each and every one of us of this hadith. The hadith that we should try to make not just the theme of this khutbah, that we forget it the second we go out. Rather, the theme of these last 10 days. الدين النصيحة. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الدين النصيحة. قلنا لمن؟ قال لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامته. صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Prophet ﷺ said, indeed the religion is sincerity. The companions asked, to whom? He said, to Allah and His book and His messenger and the leaders of the Muslims and their common folk. And just focus on fulfilling each category by doing one thing. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do the bare minimum at least of doing your obligations. If you're not fasting or praying 5 times a day, now is the time to do so. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiving. Ask for forgiveness, but do your job, do your obligations. We can't go around living our lives not even doing the bare minimum that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Creator, has asked of us to do. And if you're doing that, then at least now get close to Allah. Love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by learning His attributes. Number 2, to His book. Recite the Quran every day, even if it's a few ayahs every day. If you do that, recite it properly. Give it its due justice. And if you do that, make sure you open a translation if you don't understand the Arabic, or open a tafsir if you understand the Arabic. Make a plan by the end of this year, or next year, or 3 years from now. I want to have a full reading of the translation of the Quran. I want to be able to have understood what the Quran is telling me. The third is to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Learn his seerah. Learn the story, and it's so accessible. It's everywhere now. There's no excuse on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. There's millions of books. Whatever works for you, use that. And if you're interested, let me know, and I can direct you to a few different seerahs. If you do that, if you already know that, follow the sunnah. Do the sunnah. Instead of saying, oh, it's the sunnah, don't worry about it. Say, this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then I should do it too. The fourth is to the leaders of the Muslims, and our job in Ramadan is simply to help them back. Service them back. If they need something, we're there for them, just like they are there for us. And the fifth and final one is sincerity towards one another, towards the general population of Muslims. And our goal for that is simply remind one another of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you wake up to pray, wake up your family members. When you go to the masjid, remind your friends to come with you. Have a gathering where you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together. And if we are able to do that, then inshallah, we will be among those who have followed what Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah said, and we would be more intelligent than the horse at the end of the finish line if we push ourselves to make sure we are sincere in whatever we do. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على حبيبك ونبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم إنا نسألك الإخلاص في كل شيء اللهم إنا نسألك الإخلاص في كل شيء اللهم اجعلنا ممن يتبعون هذا الحديث اللهم اجعلنا ممن يتبعون هذا الحديث اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. And last but not least, we have an opportunity after this khutbah to help our common people and to give back. One of the rights is charity on one another, that we give one another in charity. And we give to the organizations and the people closest to us. And there is no organization, or one of the closest organizations to us, physically and figuratively, is the school, Peace Academy, that has been growing knowledgeable scholars and committed Muslims who will grow up to benefit others, inshallah. So please, we'll have a short fundraiser after the prayer. I know many people have to go. If you have to go, donate, even if it is $1 on your way out. Donate to whatever organization. It doesn't have to be Peace Academy. But make sure that every single day you donate even $1. Don't underestimate the value of the dollar on the Day of Judgment for your own sake. Because that dollar could be your ticket to Jannah. May Allah make us all among those who enter Jannah. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم واتقوه يجعل لكم مخرجا وأقم الصلاة